thank you very much. And I agree those are two major issues, taking those two in order. I'm glad that Governor Perdue did hire outside counsel to join this federal lawsuit. And I know the counsel, and they're very smart, they're very intelligent people. And I appreciate them engaging in this. We also need an official presence from the state by the Attorney General's office. So, I think what you do on day one is you join those lawsuits officially on behalf of the state of Georgia as the chief legal officer. And then you use the benefit of their legal minds in trying to fight this thing. Georgia ought to be leading on these issues, not being drug along from behind. So I agree with that, absolutely, would immediately join that and play a role in that. The Attorney General has not played a big role in the water issue and should. This thing has been a deadline coming from a long, long time. And state leaders have been short in their sightedness. They have not been looking forward to what was going to happen and dealing with it, making plans, because it's always easier to fix things on the short-term basis than to deal with big problems that are going to happen outside of your term of office. And so no governor's ever really looked seriously at it because it was always going to be something solved long after he or she was gone. But the truth of the matter is, when Atlanta struck this deal for the construction of Lake Lanier, they didn't want to spend any money on it. So they voluntarily backed away from any agreement to use the water way back then. And then over time, they've gradually become more and more dependent on the water after not wanting to engage in helping its construction. They, again, short-sightedness, they saved a few dollars several decades ago, and then found themselves in great need now. But as a result of that, you look back at the original documents, and you've got Atlanta agreeing that they won't use it for this purpose. Now, that being said, there's some practical and common sense realities too, and that is people are more important than mussels and oysters. And the fact that we've got judges that are down looking at the flow of the water in the Apalachicola Bay and talking about how we need more fresh water to support these things. In my mind, that will never be as important as people that need water for consumption, who are actual living, human, breathing Homo sapiens. And that's just the reality of things. Now, there has to be a compromise. And there's probably a compromise on several levels. I'll give you one that not a lot of people are talking about. The state of Tennessee has more water than they can use, and they acknowledge that. And the Tennessee River flows right along the Georgia border. Now, I actually do believe that when they did the survey, they set the line, they established the line, the original congressional authorizing legislation for the Georgia border in one place, then the survey took it in another place, and the Tennessee River is actually partially in Georgia from a strict historical perspective. The reality is the recognized lines are outside of that. But there again, you've got a choice. You could litigate on that issue, which would be awfully tough after, more than 100 years of the lines being where they are, or you can go to Chattanooga and strike some kind of bargain with them. There are some things Chattanooga really wants. Primarily, they want a rail access to Atlanta so that they can have people in the Chattanooga airport getting back and forth to the Atlanta airport. Now, there may be a compromise that could be worked out where we agree to help them with some rail issues they really desperately want, and they agree to give us water out of that Tennessee River that they don't even need, and they acknowledge that. There are things like that we've got to think outside the box on, and the Attorney General's office has got to be engaged. Yes, you at this point, you have to go through the litigation and look for a compromise to resolve that litigation that would allow for Lanier to be used for drinking water. Frankly, it could affect Allatoona also, because they're watching what's happening with Lanier. You've got to look for outside-the-box compromises like with Tennessee and the Tennessee River. And then I think you've also got, there are legitimate things we need to do to conserve water and to store more water. If you look at the amount of rainfall Georgia receives on an annual basis, we receive much more water from the sky than we need for consumption and for river flow. But we don't catch enough of it. That's just the bottom line. And it's expensive and difficult and takes advanced planning. But we don't want to be 20 years from now facing the same situation, people saying, why didn't they 20 years ago build reservoirs either? So we've got to be looking at the problem now and also try to fix this in the future. And I think you've got 3 or 4 different prongs of attack there. People have been looking the other direction because they're complicated. They're not people. Voters understand a lot of times a problem and a solution that's quick, and this involves understanding that you got a complicated solution that's going to help a future generation. And that's going to take people that are statesmen and not merely politicians.